Hello everybody, today we have got quite an unusual mono black with white splash deck. This is a deck based on the premise that life is a resource in Magic, and I'm going to try and explain what I'm willing to achieve with this deck. This is one of the casual decks, which means that there is no sideboard. We have played this deck in a series of casual games with Matt, and you should look forward to this match because Matt has an absolutely crazy deck with a combo that many of you, I'm sure, never even realized existed. This is a really interesting interaction based on modern rules, but yeah, I'm not going to spoil it for you. Anyway, let's talk about this deck. I've been working on it for quite a long time. It's still far from perfection, but I really like the idea. I really like how this deck plays. So, as I have said, it's mostly a mono black deck. We have got some, instead of City of Brass, of course, should be Scrubland, but I usually don't put the best and top cards in my casual deck. So there's also Caracas, not really relevant. There's also Mox Pearl, the only piece of power, the only really powerful card that we've got in this deck. But the basic premise is the following. You have got some creatures with lifelink. So you have got some creatures that are able to give you life, right? So you either use El Hajij and pump him, or you can use Spirit Link on some of your creatures, or you can also use Drain Life to get some life, and then use life as a resource for greed, Hellfire, and ashes to ashes. Of course, it doesn't always work that way, but the feeling of gaining life in old school Magic is a rather unusual one, I would say. There is probably just the Ivory Tower combo that is more or less viable, and other than that there are not so many abilities that are really competitive. So yes, let's talk about El Hajij first of all. A 1/1, gain 1 life for every point of damage he inflicts. Let's remember that this is not your modern lifelink ability. This is slightly worse because lifelink happens at the moment of dealing damage, so meaning that if somebody attacks you and you block with some other creatures, basically if you are to receive 5 damage but your creature will heal you for 5 damage, then you don't lose the game. With this ability you do lose, because at first the damage occurs and then you will get this alive from your creatures with this ability. So anyway, El Hajij definitely overpriced, overcosted, I mean, and actually is quite expensive for the Arabian Nights copy that I do not have. So, you know, there is this interesting premise that I've heard quite often, that Wizards of the Coast and, well, Richard Gard himself usually like to base the mana cost of abilities rather than base power and toughness, and this is true when you look at an overwhelming majority of early cards. So they definitely could have been bigger, and this would have been more fair. So later on, of course, they realized that this ability shouldn't cost 2 mana. But anyway, it was just fun to try that and play this. Next we've got Netlingam. So Netlingam plays a couple of roles here. Of course, there is no combo with Netlingam that you could use with Icy Manipulator, for example, or something similar, making your opponent's creature unable to attack and then forcing it to attack, effectively killing it. But we can have some more basic things, such as forcing your opponent's creature to attack and killing them with a big guy, or maybe Infernal Medusa, which essentially is a black thicket basilisk, a really nice creature, by the way. Or, which is sometimes even more fun, you can gain life with some of your creatures that you just cause to fight with your opponent's creatures. So even if they don't kill each other, you will be able to gain quite a lot of life in case you have got Spirit Link on a big creature, or maybe a couple of Spirit Links, or maybe even something more impressive. Next, we have got Frozen Shade. Frozen Shade, +1/+1. You know how this card works. We sometimes can get quite a lot of mana, and if we manage to get Spirit Link on him, this can be quite fearsome and can easily compensate for the damage that you receive in combat. So I just like this idea of attacking, getting damage back, getting life back that you suffered from your opponent's attacks. It's a really new dimension. Ankalist one. So as you see, Ankalist one cannot be killed by creatures. Well, he can be killed by creatures technically, but he can't be killed by damage from creatures. Really crazy hermit, and he's not a legend, which always puzzles me because this was released. You can barely see the sign, you can barely see the symbol of the expansion in the dark, which was later than the release of Legends, but they still kept the idea of Legends unique to that set back then. Anyway, there are 4 uncles, they're all named Istvan, and they have this really crazy ability. So, of course, can be pumped, right? We've got a couple of things to pump our creatures. We have got Batmoon, we even have got this battle gear, and it doesn't really matter that he will have only 1 toughness, right? Doesn't really matter. And what's really nice is that, of course, yes, he can block, he can safely attack, and you shouldn't be afraid of him being killed. And even if he is blocked and he is enchanted by Spirit Link, he will be getting life for that. So that's nice. Of course, that's a bit weak, 1/3, but remember that we have Batman, we have some pump, so overall quite nice in this particular army. Next, we have got Infernal Medusa, which we have actually already discussed. Let's look at Eater of the Dead. It's just such a heavy metal card. The art here is exceptional, absolutely exceptional. Oh, they're just, I don't know, because it doesn't feel creepy. It's just a terrifying card in the good sense of this word, and you can even feel the reflections. You can see the reflections of fire on it. It's just a really powerful card. So what does it do? Not much, unfortunately. It's just a 3/4 for 5 mana with this pseudo vigilance. The ability is very interesting. When you attack, not necessarily when you attack, when this creature is tapped, maybe with your opponent's Icy Manipulator, you can eat a dead, hence Eater of the Dead, from one of the graveyards, and untap him. So again, this usually gives him pseudo vigilance, which is a bit underwhelming for the amount of mana that you have, but just felt like playing this card. I'm sure that there are some nice combos with, infinite untap, but in old school, there isn't much you can do with him. So a really nice card anyway. Next, we have got a card that I have got great memories of, at least because this card was very often at the very top of the alphabetical list of old Magic cards. I used to have, I don't even remember what the name was. Perhaps it's not even Magic Workstation, Magic Suitcase. Does anybody remember that? I may even be wrong, but I just remember those days that back in the year 2000 there was a CD that came with one of the games magazines that I bought, Video Games magazine, and it just contained the whole database. We didn't have any internet back then, and it just contained the whole database of all Magic cards. And there were no pictures, of course. It was only later on that I was able to download picture sets, and it was even more interesting. But back then I just looked through different cards. I was surprised, at what different interesting things they had. So yeah, there were some of the earliest cards in the list, right? There was Abeyance, there was About Face, there was Abomination. So again, I just remember this guy. Anyway, what does he do? 2/6 for 5 mana. At the end of combat, destroy all green and white creatures blocking or blocked by. So essentially works like Cockatrice. I mean, Thicket Basilisk, but for green and white creatures, not really special, but just nice to have. 2/6, and the art is so weird. I don't know, for some reason it looks funny to me rather than frightening. Next we have got the Wretched. Now the Wretched is a really interesting card. I'm not the first person who has tried to make this card work, and I don't really have a lot of mechanisms here to be able to take advantage of this. But again, what I would usually do is that I will pump him, I will put Spirit Link on him, and just make my opponent want to block this creature, right? So what happens is that at the end of combat you gain control of all creatures blocking the Wretched. Unfortunately, you cannot block your opponent's creature and gain control of them. No, it's only about you attacking, them blocking, and of course only in case they don't die. If they do die, then too bad. So, however, it sometimes is possible. So 2/5, meaning 2 power, you can sometimes have your opponent's 3/3, right? If they block you, then you will just steal their creature. I mean, you can even steal Ser Angel or Singil the Vampire. So that's really nice. Lose control if the Wretched leaves play, or if you lose control of the Wretched. Makes sense. It's one of those cards that I said should supposedly have flying, but don't necessarily have to do it. And yeah, maybe it's not the best example of them. Anyway, this is a nice card. This is something we should go back to when trying to make some kind of synergy combos with it. Next we've got a She-Man Night Stalker. Well, 4/4, 5 mana, not really impressive. For 1 black and tap, you essentially use this bodyguard ability, so it works like veteran bodyguard, as you can see. But not even the same thing, I guess, right? Anyway, didn't really use this, so it was just a 4/4 for 5 mana. Battle Gear can work quite nicely with some big guys you've got. I only have 1 copy in this deck. +2, -2. That's all right. One of those artifacts that is, you know, tapped and turned on, or if you want to turn it off, you may choose to untap it during opponents. I'm sorry, not opponents, but your upkeep. Now, Batmoon, of course, for copies might work even against you if you're playing against some fast aggro black deck. Next we've got Ashes to Ashes. So this is one of the cards that I have said may be used by you in order to use life as a resource. So if you definitely have some life gaining creatures on the table, why not use Ashes to Ashes on your opponent's 2 creatures and just attack, getting this life back. Next we have got Drain Life, so of course 4 copies. Drain Life is incredibly powerful in this deck. The overwhelming majority of mana sources produce black mana, and it's just a nice card by itself. It can act as a removal, it can act as a finisher, or again can gain us a little bit more life. And one of the things we like to do with life is using Greed. Greed is such a great card to use. I don't know, it really feels like playing a lottery and you just go crazy spending a lot of life on it. Of course it's not as good as Necropotence, but 93, 94 we don't have that. And besides, this card is not banned, you know, in pretty much every format. So yes, definitely should be keeping in mind who we are playing against. Sometimes shouldn't go too crazy, especially if you expect a fireball or so. And next we have got, so since, as you have noticed, all creatures in this deck are black, we are able to use Hellfire. Let me remind you what it does. Hellfire destroys all non-black creatures, and for each creature destroyed that way. Oh, by the way, I just noticed they're Crusaders, actually. Interesting. So for each creature destroyed that way, you get X damage, and you know, there is 3 damage just because you cast the card. So let's say you destroy 4 creatures, 7 damage to you. Quite a lot, but then again, we hope that it gives us some advantage on board. And as I have said, of course, there are 4 copies of Spirit Link. Perhaps I should have Skull of Worm, something similar, to be able to get back these enchantments. And just for fun, decided to throw in a copy of Divine Transformation. I'm not always able to have 2 white, so it's just here for fun. And overall, as I have said, the deck itself is a rather fun build. I'm planning to get back to this idea, maybe make it a bit stronger, but then again, the more staples you add, the more you dilute the deck, and the less fun it becomes. Anyway, look forward to the match that I'm playing using this deck, and thank you for watching. Bye.